The news spread quickly around the world. A new pope had been chosen. The basilica's bells and the announced name echoed on televisions, cell phones, and radios of millions. But for those familiar with certain ancient records, this selection seems more than just a religious milestone. There's something deeper happening behind this moment. A disturbing detail draws attention. Decades ago, a man considered by many to be one of history's greatest seers recorded a prophecy eerily aligned with what is unfolding now. Edgar Cayce, in one of his lesser-known accounts, pointed to a period where changes in spiritual leadership would indicate something even greater about to occur. Seemingly symbolic, this transition holds clues to a cycle of events that, according to him, would primarily affect those already over 60. This excerpt from Cayce's revelations went largely unnoticed for a long time, perhaps because it seemed distant, too symbolic. But today, seeing the new leader announced, certain words from the past take on a different weight. Cayce mentioned that a moment of global spiritual reorganization would mark the beginning of a delicate stage for humanity, especially for the older generation. He didn't speak of immediate disasters, but of a profound demand for inner change, a review of values and emotional preparedness. For many, this may sound vague, but for those paying attention, the signs have already started to appear. If you've made it this far, it's worth subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button. These topics don't always make headlines, but here we delve deeper into what others only mention. The prophecy continues, and what it reveals next might change how you view this historical moment. Cayce asserted that after the arrival of a new religious leadership, older individuals would need to choose between two paths: remaining trapped in fear or awakening to a new understanding of life. He described a time when traditional faith would be tested not by external attacks, but by an inner shift in millions of people. Questions about what truly matters, what comes after life, and each person's mission on this earth would begin to surface more forcefully. This, according to him, would cause discomfort in many, but also open the door to a type of peace that only someone who has lived long enough to look back could attain. And now, with the selection of a new pope, these words resonate like a subtle yet powerful call. For Cayce, this wouldn't be a time of fear, but of clarity. He said that many seniors would sense almost instinctively that something in the air had changed. It wouldn't be a visible change, but an inner feeling, as if time was demanding a deeper, more honest response. Faith structures, once firm, would begin to be questioned quietly but consistently. And this wouldn't mean abandoning spirituality, but rather a reconnection with what it truly means. Cayce saw this moment as a bridge between the visible and the invisible, between the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. Those who went through this process with courage, he said, would become silent guides for younger people, not with words, but with the example of a peace won from within. This transition, according to him, wouldn't occur abruptly. It would be like the aging of the day when the light changes subtly until we realize that night has arrived. And the curious thing is that he mentioned a specific figure linked to the Vatican as a sign of this beginning, not by name or origin, but by the energy of renewal they would bring. When the new pope was seen as someone conciliatory, yet firm in their decisions, that would be the start of this cycle. And today, observing the chosen one's profile, many of these characteristics seem to coincide with the description made so many years ago. This isn't about blindly believing, but about paying attention to the signs. Cayce never asked for blind faith, but rather for lucidity. He invited people to observe the world with the eyes of the spirit, not just with those of the flesh. In this new time, the greatest challenges wouldn't be outside, but within each person. Cayce warned that emotional suffering would be the main obstacle for the older generation. Not physical ailments, not health, but the loss of meaning, the feeling of no longer belonging to the current time. And it's here that his message becomes most urgent. He said this feeling shouldn't be ignored, as it was, in fact, a call to awakening. Aging would be, for many, the last invitation to transformation. Those who heeded this inner call would have the chance to access a broader understanding of life. It wasn't about changing religion or abandoning beliefs, but about going beyond what had always been believed. It was like removing the veil covering what lies behind what has always been accepted without reflection. Cayce described that this phase of inner transformation could cause discomfort at first. He spoke of a kind of spiritual loneliness, a feeling that everything that once made sense now seemed distant or empty. Many older adults, he said, would experience silent nights of deep reflection, where old certainties would no longer suffice. But this discomfort wouldn't be the end. It would be just the beginning of something truer, a reunion with oneself, with the soul, and with the natural cycles of existence. The choice of a new pope in this context wouldn't just represent a change in the Church's hierarchy, but the start of a collective call, a silent plea for the older generation to become aware of the role they still have. And that role, according to Cayce, would be much more relevant than one might imagine. He affirmed that modern society, by excessively valuing youth, had forgotten an essential truth. The wisdom of the elderly is indispensable for balancing the world. But for this to happen, older individuals would need to recognize their own worth. Many, he said, give in to oblivion, believing they no longer have a function. Cayce saw this thinking as one of humanity's greatest misconceptions. For him, the true spiritual future of the planet would depend on the lucidity and awakening of the older generations. The new pope, even unknowingly, would come as a catalyst for this process. His leadership would bring to light profound questions, causing millions to rethink life, faith, death, and the purpose of being here. All of this would begin in silence, but with impacts that would become visible over time. The prophecy at its core pointed to a reconciliation between the spirit and everyday life. Cayce said that, after 60, human beings have the chance to live more authentically. It's the moment when social masks fall away, external pressures diminish, and what remains is the essence. But to access this clarity, one would need to go through a process of deep acceptance, accepting the time that has passed, the mistakes made, the opportunities lost, and, especially, what can still be lived. The new pope, within this reading, would just be a mirror, someone who, by assuming a role of late leadership, invites everyone to look at themselves with more compassion and responsibility. It's not about religion, but about consciousness. And that consciousness, for Cayce, was the only real path to the transformation of the soul. In Cayce's eyes, aging wasn't a burden, but a noble stage of existence. He saw this phase as the highlight of life, the moment when the spirit is most capable of understanding what truly matters. But for this to happen, it's necessary to silence the external noise and turn inward. He suggested simple practices, such as daily moments of silence, contemplation, and writing. Not to escape the world, but to reorganize the inner world. The choice of a new pope, in this sense, would function as a symbolic reminder. There's still time to start something new, to change what seemed immutable. And those who have passed 60 have precisely what many young people don't yet have: lived time, memory, and experiences that can illuminate future paths. That's a power, albeit a silent one. This power, however, is often ignored by those who possess it. Cayce warned that modern society had trained older people to withdraw, to be silent, to feel outdated. But he saw this as a dangerous distortion. For him, the spirit matures with time, and as it matures, it acquires a unique ability to guide others. But this requires courage to break with conformity, to look at oneself honestly, to forgive the past, and to open oneself to what is yet to come. And the most interesting thing is that he said that this change doesn't need to be collective, nor does it need to be announced. It's enough for a single older person to awaken, for the vibration to transform around them. The appointment of the new pope, then, would be just one of the many triggers foreseen to start this silent and powerful process. Cayce didn't offer formulas, nor did he guarantee certainties. What he left were orientations, clues that would only make sense to those who were ready to see. And perhaps that's why his words are returning now with such force. Amidst a fast-paced world, full of distractions and noise, there's something deeply valuable in stopping and reflecting on what is really happening. Most people see the change of leadership in the Vatican as just another fact among many others. But those who pay attention realize that certain global movements have a broader significance. Cayce said that spiritual signs rarely shout, they whisper, and only those who are at peace with their own soul can hear. Perhaps that's why he insisted so much on the importance of preparing emotionally after 60, not to wait for the end, but to live the essential. This emotional preparation, according to him, also involved dealing with what had been left behind. Many older people carry regrets, resentments, and unresolved decisions. Cayce saw this as an opportunity, not as a burden. He said that after 60, the soul has enough maturity to transform pain into wisdom, and that the arrival of a new spiritual leader, like the Pope, could function as a collective moment of release, not because of the words he says, but because of the symbolism of new beginnings. Each new cycle is an invitation to let go of what no longer serves. Therefore, Cayce recommended that older individuals review their history with a gentler look, not to forget what has happened, but to understand the reason for each stage, and this, for him, was the true spiritual rebirth. However, he also warned that not everyone would accept this invitation. Many would resist, clinging to routines, repetitive thoughts, certainties that no longer serve. He said that this resistance would cause suffering, as the world would continue to change, and those who refuse to change internally feel increasingly lost. Therefore, the role of those who awaken would be so important. According to Cayce, it's not necessary to convince anyone nor to teach anything. It's enough to live consistently, with serenity and presence. That already transforms everything around. When an older person chooses to live with lucidity, they become a point of stability amidst chaos. And in this time when so many people feel confused, tired, or without direction, that type of presence is more valuable than any advice. It's a silent anchor. And here's a point that Cayce highlighted firmly: no one is too old to start. He said that the soul doesn't age, only the body. Each person's mission can be revealed at 70, 80, or even later. But to perceive it, one must be willing to look with humility within. It's not about doing great things, but about living truthfully. Sometimes, someone's mission is simply to take care of a plant, write a note, give good advice, or listen attentively. These small actions have a profound impact even if they don't appear in the news. And by understanding this, older people begin to occupy their place in the world with more lightness. The new Pope, in this scenario, isn't a distant figure. He is just a sign, a reminder that change begins within each one. Cayce's vision wasn't fatalistic. He didn't believe in sealed destinies or inevitable tragedies. For him, each person carries within themselves the key to their own liberation, and this includes those who have already gone through a lot, who have seen the world change before their eyes and faced losses, silences, and new beginnings. He said that precisely because of this group has a sensitivity that younger people haven't yet developed. This sensitivity, when embraced, transforms into wisdom, but when ignored, it turns into anguish. And that's why so many older people live today with a weight on their chest without knowing exactly why. Cayce saw this pain as a sign that something is calling for attention, something that isn't physical nor emotional, but spiritual. And this call can only be heard when there's inner silence and a willingness to listen. The choice of the new Pope comes at this exact moment when millions of people over 60 are seeking meaning. Perhaps not consciously, perhaps not with words, but with a restlessness that insists on surfacing in the intervals of the day. And it's not a coincidence, said Cayce. Global cycles don't happen by chance. There's an intelligence behind what seems only political or religious. When a new figure emerges to lead, especially in an institution with so much symbolic weight like the Vatican, something within people also moves. It's as if the collective unconscious is activated. And in this case, he said that older people would feel this impact more intensely, not because of fragility, but because they are closer to the essence of life. Those who embrace this feeling with curiosity will find valuable answers. Cayce saw aging as a return to the essential. When distractions diminish, commitments are reduced, and time begins to be felt differently. He said that in this state, the soul becomes more visible. Therefore, he insisted so much that older people not get lost in distractions, but turn to what remains. The new Pope may even seem like just another public figure, But for those who see beyond the surface, he represents an opportunity to renew one's own faith. Not faith in others, nor in institutions, but faith in oneself, in one's ability to grow, to change, and to contribute. And that's why Cayce said that this phase of life can actually be the richest of all. Just decide to live it with open eyes, with courage to feel, and with humility to start over as many times as necessary. Even for those who have never heard of Cayce, his messages make sense because they touch universal points. All of us, at some point, face doubts about the value of our existence, especially when aging. Does it still matter? Is there still something to offer? And his answer was clear: yes. As long as there is life, there is purpose. But this purpose doesn't need to be grand in the eyes of the world. It only needs to be true to those who live it. A welcoming look, a word spoken calmly, a memory shared at the right moment. All of this transforms lives. Cayce said that the world needs this more than ever. In times of haste and noise, the calm presence of someone who has seen a lot and still chooses to believe in good is a gift. And that's what the older generation can still offer in abundance. Cayce also highlighted that the great moments of humanity are almost always preceded by small signs. Seemingly simple changes, such as the choice of a new spiritual leader, can carry profound effects. And when these signs emerge, he said, the more attentive perceive them. Perhaps that's why he insisted so much on the importance of keeping the mind awake. Wisdom isn't in the accumulation of knowledge, but in the ability to perceive what is before one's eyes. And today, more than ever, it's this sensitivity that makes a difference. Those who have lived a lot possess a more refined reading of time. They feel when something has changed, even if they can't yet explain it with words. And it's at this point that the prophecy finds its value, as a tool for guidance, not for fear. For those over 60, the message is direct. It doesn't matter whether you believe in prophecies or not, whether you follow the church or another spiritual path. What matters is realizing that this historical moment carries an invitation, a silent call to live with more awareness, more presence, and more truth. The choice of the new pope, in this context, is just the beginning of a larger movement, a cycle of inner review that can transform the life of anyone willing to look honestly at themselves. Cayce said that the last years of life can be the fullest if lived with purpose, and perhaps by paying attention to this moment, you'll discover that there's still much to be done. Not outside of you, but inside, because the real change begins there, in the silence of one's own soul. Life, as Cayce said, doesn't end with age. It deepens. The time that many see as the end can in fact be the beginning of a new stage of understanding. It's not about denying the body or the limits that time imposes, but about recognizing that the soul remains active, sensitive, and capable of evolving. By observing the events around us, like the election of a new pope, we can choose between the habit of simply watching or the exercise of interpreting. Interpreting with an open heart, with the wisdom that only the years bring. Because there are lessons in everything, even in what seems distant. And when we see life with this lens, each gesture, each change, and each collective choice transforms into a sign that there's still time to learn, grow, and especially contribute something real. Cayce never asked people to believe everything he said. What he offered was an invitation to reflection, a call for each person to seek their own truth, especially those who have lived enough to know that time is valuable. His prophecy isn't about the fear of the future, but about the chance to make the present something more meaningful. And by relating this to the arrival of a new spiritual leader, he reminds us that nothing happens by chance. Each cycle that ends brings the opportunity to start again more consciously. And if you've made it this far, perhaps you feel even discreetly this same call. Life doesn't demand ready-made answers, but asks for listening. Listening to what moves within us when everything around changes. Listening and choosing with wisdom. If this message touched something in you, consider subscribing to the channel and sharing it with someone who also needs to reflect on this moment. Sometimes all a person needs to change the course of their own life is a new idea, a different perspective on what is happening. And if Cayce is right, this is exactly the time to look with more attention, not outward, but inward. The new pope may be just a public figure for many, but for those who are attentive, he represents something greater, a symbol of change, a mirror for our own internal cycles. And you, who are over 60, carry within you what the world needs most now, lived wisdom. May that wisdom find space to flourish, and may this new phase of your life begin with the awareness that it's never too late to awaken.